Compression. Overdrive. What's the difference? You gonna learn today. What's up, guys? Hope you're doing great out there today. My name is Kyle, and if this is your first time here at my channel, what I do is I take awesome amps, overdrives, guitars, pedals, speakers, pickups, I record them with a simple SM57 setup, and I give you guys the unprocessed audio on your end. So if you're into E standard thrash riffs, drop C hardcore riffs, and dudes who had to rehearse that intro 3 times to get it right, you're in the right place. Consider hitting the like button and subscribing on your way out so you don't miss any more of my stuff. Thanks. All right, guys, today, the age-old question. I have seen this discussed many times in Facebook gear groups and online forums. What is the difference between a compressor and an overdrive? I've actually met a few people who use compressors on their high gain rhythm tones instead of overdrives, and I always kind of wondered why. Because as far as I knew, compressors really were only good at making your notes sustain longer and basically removing the dynamics out of your playing when you want your dynamics removed, when you want things to be a little bit more evened out. I also heard Mick from That Pedal Show say something really interesting one time where he said, a compressor is essentially an overdrive for your clean channel, which makes a lot of sense because when you're playing clean stuff, you're playing bluesy little licks and stuff like that, and you want your notes to ring out a little bit longer. A lot of the times they happen to die off before you're ready for them to die off because there's nothing sustaining them. Well, if you have a compressor engaged in front of your amplifier, it's definitely going to allow that note to ring out longer because it is essentially going to increase the volume of that note as it gets quieter from your guitar to kind of let it ring out longer. So where does that help us in the picture of high gain? Well, in the high gain world, compressors are very often found in a lot of 80s shred metal bands and stuff like that because they want something to essentially help them with their leads and their solos. Something that when they're doing all those crazy finger acrobatics, you know, when you're going a million miles an hour on the fretboard, a lot of the times the notes that you're going to be hitting aren't going to be super clean, or you're not going to be able to hit them with a ton of force. It's going to be just a quick strike on the string or a quick tap on the fretboard, and a lot of times that's not enough to really make it pop off the fretboard and through the speakers. So what a compressor does is it takes all those notes that you're playing and it essentially evens them out a little bit. So when you're going crazy on a lead, it's really bringing the notes that you're hitting with a lower volume up in the mix of your overall guitar playing and making them more prominent so they're heard a little bit better. And essentially it's just making the guitar and the amp easier to play for those leads. Now with an overdrive, it can actually kind of be used for the same thing. With an overdrive, you're gonna be adding level from the pedal into the front of the amp. So that naturally is just going to hit the front of the amp harder. You're going to get a little bit more sustain from your guitar because the pedal is going to push the volume into the amp, and it's also going to compress the front end of the amp a little bit because it's going to be hitting it with more volume, which causes natural compression in high gain amplifiers. But on top of that, you can also engage drive or clipping from the pedal to give you even more saturation. And again, it's going to make playing solos and stuff like that easier because when you have more gain, you have more compression, and that just naturally makes the notes pop off the fretboard a little easier. It makes harmonics come off the fretboard a little bit easier. So a lot of guys, if they're not using a compressor for their crazy leads and stuff, they're using an overdrive to help them not only sustain and kind of make things a little bit easier to play, but overdrives often have a voicing that pushes the mids and the highs a little bit more forward and reduces the bass notes and kind of tightens them up a little bit. So this naturally, when you're playing leads, pushing those mids forward, especially the upper mids, is going to make those notes really just cut through a mix like crazy. But when it comes to high gain rhythm playing, which is what most of the viewers of my channel are gonna be interested in the first place, because that's essentially what I am. I am a high gain rhythm player. I am certainly not a lead player. Which one of these is going to benefit your amp more? I myself have personally used exclusively overdrive pedals in front of my amp for the last 10 years or so. I have tried compressors, I have tried clean boosts, and they just didn't work as well for me. I just didn't like what they did to my signal as much. Overdrives really do a great job at tightening the low end, making it more percussive, adding a little bit more harmonic content to your signal, putting the mids forward a little bit more in the mix, and just kind of making your rhythm tones sit exactly where it should be. If you're recording metal guitar tones, a lot of the times one of the first things you do is you go in and you cut all of the stuff under, say, 100 hertz in the guitar EQ to kind of make it sit where it needs to in the mix and not fumble over the bass and the kick drum and stuff. Well, a compressor kind of works in a similar way. It definitely takes out a lot of those lower frequencies and cleans up that low end. So not only is your guitar signal tighter, but it kind of just fits into the mix a little bit better. The overdrive really kind of does the opposite. It will actually fatten things up a little bit. It'll bring your low notes up a little bit more in the mix, and it will also chop off that high end, because what it is doing is it is not only evening out the volume, but it is compressing the dynamics as well. So when your high notes are really bright and really loud, they're naturally going to cut through the mix a little bit more. This is gonna cut the top end off of those. So that is what they're gonna do in front of high gain amps. Hopefully my description made sense there. But in order to help you guys better understand, we're going to go ahead and we're gonna check these pedals out in front of an amp, compare and contrast, so you guys can really see the differences of how a compressor versus an overdrive work in front of a high gain amp. Redundancy. And to do that, I'm going to use these two pedals that I have been waving around on camera today. This is the all pedal Bushido Drive Slammer boost, and this is the all pedal Galacta-Vise. So without further ado, let's do it. Okay guys, so now that we know a little bit more about the differences between a compressor and an overdrive, we're gonna go ahead and put them into action. I have my Mesa Badlander 50 here set up. We are on the Crunch channel with the gain turned up fairly high. Both of the pedals are off. We are gonna revisit the intro riff from the beginning of the video, and I'm gonna explain to you the differences between the overdrive and the compressor, so you know what you're listening for. So first off, the amp. We have a fairly mid-gain tone, I would say. There's not a lot of gain on this at the moment. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and kick in the Galacta-Vise first. We have it set up with the level fairly high to give us a little bit of an output boost. We've got the mix set around 10 o'clock here on the dial, so that means we're gonna get a little bit more of our clean guitar signal than we will the compressed signal from the pedal, but we'll mess around with those controls a little bit more as we go in the video. I have the presence all the way up to just kind of keep all of that high end intact, or as much as we possibly can. And then over here, our attack I have set pretty aggressively over at 3 o'clock. Sustain I have set at 10 o'clock. So here's the riff with no compressor, and then we'll go ahead and kick the compressor on. All right, so let's go ahead and kick that compressor on. Okay, so as you can tell, when the compressor is kicked on, it just kind of squashes everything together. It really makes the notes that are a little bit lower, that I'm not picking quite as hard, come up in the overall guitar signal, I guess you could say. It makes them more apparent. It makes them more level with something like the big palm mutes. And it actually pulls the low end back just a tad and compresses it. And overall, it just makes it sound a little bit more smooth, a little bit less dynamic. But if you are somebody like me who kind of struggles with single note type stuff, as you could probably tell in those riffs, I can't play them super cleanly. I just don't have that ability. That's where compression becomes your friend, because it can actually kind of help you hide those mistakes and make your picking overall sound a little bit more consistent. So that's why when people say, you know, when you're playing on like a 5150, a really compressed high gain amplifier, it hides a lot of your mistakes. Well, that's what the amp is doing. It's got a lot of compression and a lot of gain, so it does not require you to play with as much finesse on your right hand. You don't have to pick as hard. You don't have to fret as cleanly. It's still going to pick the notes up with ease, whereas you go to from a 5150 to a JCM 800, something that's very dry, not a lot of gain, not a lot of compression, you're going to have to try a lot harder to play and make that riff sound clean. And the Badlander Crunch channel is kind of the same way. It's not really all that compressed. So that was the compressor. We are gonna go ahead and hear one more time the clean amp, and then I'm gonna kick in the overdrive to show you what the overdrive does. Let's kick that overdrive in. So as you can tell with our overdrive, we are definitely adding some output. We're adding a little bit of saturation via the gain or the clipping that is built into the pedal. We also are kind of bringing the mids and the treble a little bit more forward and reducing some of the low end with the overdrive. Now the overdrive, because you are hitting the front end of the amp, with the overdrive you are hitting the front end of the amp harder than you would with just the pickup of your guitar, it is naturally going to compress the front end of the low amp a little bit. So you can see there's a pretty significant difference. Like with the overdrive, you can definitely actually add some high end and cut a lot of lows and really kind of tighten things up and make them more punchy. With the compressor, you're kind of just thickening everything up. You're taking off the highs, you're taking off the lows, you're taking those low notes in the mix and you're raising them up in volume. You're taking those high notes in the mix and you're lowering them in volume. So everything, instead of being like this, shrinks down into a narrower bandwidth and everything is kind of roughly a more uniform volume. So where I really think the compressor is going to matter the most, it's not for a player like me who plays primarily rhythm. It's going to be for the lead guys. If you want kind of a sustained boost, if you want to make those solos really just kind of fly off the fretboard, if you're capable of doing that, I certainly am not. That compressor is going to go a long ways in making things easier to play, especially if you are in a more modern metal band or a thrash metal band where you're not playing with a ton of gain. Kicking in a compressor is an easy way to kind of just make your solos a little bit easier to play. They're gonna sound a little bit more uniform. They're gonna ring out better. Pinch harmonics and stuff are gonna fly off the fretboard easier. But as far as like tightening up a high gain amp and stuff, it's not really what it's meant for. That is what the overdrive is meant for. But there's no reason to say that you can't use them in unison. Kick on your overdrive to tighten up your rhythm tones, tighten and brighten them up, add a little bit of saturation. And then when you're ready to bust out a sick, nasty lead, you can hit the compressor and then that will make everything just feel like liquid on the fretboard and everything will just kind of jump right off for you. It'll be super easy to play. Okay, so I have both pedals on and I'm gonna try my best at a lead. And then we're gonna call it a day. Okay, so that's with both pedals on. Now again, if I turn these off, as you can tell, much less sustain. The notes are much harder to get off of the fretboard. One last time, we'll kick that compressor in. So as you guys can see, just by kicking that compressor on for that little bit of the lead, the notes rang out easier, they rang out longer, they sounded fuller. So again, this is really gonna be mainly for the lead player, somebody playing a lot of lead stuff. that really needs that compression to kind of help things sustain and cut through the mix a little bit better. The Overdrive is more or less going to be for your rhythm player when it comes to high gain amps, to kind of tighten up their tone, make it a little bit more percussive, add a little bit of mid so that sits in the mix a little bit better. And if you want to get crazy, you can absolutely use them together to just get some ridiculous gain on top of your regular amp's tone. There really is a number of different ways that you can use these pedals with your amp. So I have always been curious about the differences between compression and overdrive on a high gain amp, and you know what? I gotta thank All Pedal for sending out the Galacta-Vise for me to check out and kind of experiment with it for the first time, because now I kind of truly understand what the differences are between the pedals. So I hope that this video helped you guys understand what the differences are between the pedals. And if it did, let me know down in the comments. I'm always curious to see what you guys think about these videos. I hope that you find them helpful. And if there are any more pedal combinations that you guys would like me to check out on high gain amps, put those down in the comments below as well, because I'm always down there reading that stuff to see what you guys want to try and be the most helpful. And if you are interested in purchasing either of these pedals from All Pedal, you guys can go down into the description of my video, use the code Bushido15, and you guys will get a 15% discount on anything that you order from the All Pedal store. That is my affiliate link. I do get a little kickback if you use that, and you also get a discount, so we both win. And if you would further like to support the channel, down in the description of this video are my other affiliate links, including my Sweetwater affiliate link. You click that link, get yourself something nice from the fine folks at Sweetwater. It costs you nothing extra, and I get a little kickback. It really helps my channel move forward. Or consider putting your name on this list of very fine people by joining my Patreon community and supporting the channel that way. I would love you forever, even if you don't want me to. And finally, consider becoming a member of the Belligerent Amateur community by joining my Discord server or my Facebook group. Again, all this stuff is down below in the description of the video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button on the way out and consider subscribing if you're not already. Kyle here again. We'll see you next time.